So today we're going to talk about undercurrents. And you're going to be like, what is undercurrents? Well, undercurrents is paying attention to subtle changes in the news or the economy or in the trucking industry. There's they're like trend lines. They're subtle. They're very subtle. Um, if you're not paying attention, you'll miss it. So if you weren't paying attention yesterday, you probably missed that the Federal Reserve announced that it's their intention to cut rates in September, interest rates. That's very, very important. Well, that's kind of like an undercurrent. It's like that's going to have industry impact. It's going to affect the economy for years to come. The Federal Reserve is shifting monetary policy, and they're going to start cutting rates. Now, they didn't say by how much, but just the fact that they're going to start cutting in and of itself is symbolic. Even if it's only a 1/4%, that's fine. And as a result, yesterday the stock market jumped 1.5, almost 2%. Again, if you were in the market already, then you benefited from that spectacular boost in one day. So, you got to be in the market in order to win. You can't be sitting on the sidelines. So these are undercurrents. So other things that are undercurrents, it may be, the economy, the economic outlook, the jobs report. When you think about companies reporting quarterly earnings, for example, they have earnings call with an analyst. These are all undercurrents. So if Walmart, for example, has an earnings call and they report quarterly loss, there's an impact from that earnings call because there's some underlying issues there between the economy and Walmart, for example. There are some companies that act as like bellwethers, for the economy at large. Walmart's like one of them. So Amazon is another. These are not only Fortune 500 companies, they're Fortune 50 companies. So when they take a dip in profitability, that has larger implications for the economy at large. And these are kind of like undercurrents. So what you need to know as an owner operator is that you need to be aware, what your surroundings are, what the business environment is like that you're trying to operate in. They may say ignorance is bliss, but not when you're a small business owner. Ignorance can cause you to have a lot of pain. So you don't want to be ignorant of undercurrents. I think company drivers who don't have to worry about that, it falls into the category of ignorance is bliss. It has no impact on them. So for them, ignorance is bliss. But for an owner operator, ignorance can kill your business. So you can't really be ignorant and try to be an owner operator. You have to be aware of these undercurrents. And really, it's just tuning in, just having your finger on the pulse of the larger picture. What's going on, with the economy, within the industry. The more you have a feel for it, the better you're able to project, what's coming in the near term. What's going to come in the next 3 months or 6 months. So let's look at some of the current undercurrents. Is we have interest rates coming down. We have fall season, and then the holiday season approaching. We have economic indicators that shows that tariffs are not raising inflation as some people feared. We have tariff revenue coming into the Treasury. That's good. We have the big beautiful bill, which cut taxes, cut regulations. That's good. So these are all small, subtle changes in the economy, but they add up. You combine all these things together, they add up. What's another undercurrent? Well, if the State Department puts a pause, a freeze on foreign drivers' visas, there's another undercurrent that's going to ripple through the trucking industry. That could improve rates on the spot market, for example, because there would be less drivers hauling cheap freight. You know, as the price of freight goes up, that could ripple through, even contract freight. You could see wage increases if, there's a positive impact. Again, the State Department putting a freeze on foreign drivers' visa, that's kind of like an undercurrent. So if you are paying attention and you notice all these things, this is going to benefit you as a small business owner. You're in tune to what's going on around you. You're not oblivious to the outside world. You are fully aware, fully engaged. You understand, what the undercurrents are. You can start getting a feel of what's to come. And what's to come looks pretty good. Now, AI could be an undercurrent, but that's still pretty far off on the horizon. Although there are some self-driving trucks in Texas and maybe in Arizona, but it's still far from having an impact nationwide or industry-wide. It's there, but not in a major way, at least not yet. Uh, Undercurrents can help you plan. So if you're thinking about buying another truck, if you're tuned into undercurrents, you might think, well, truck prices are high now, but given a couple months or a few months, truck prices may come down. So if you're oblivious to the fact, or oblivious to undercurrents, then you just pay whatever the current truck price is. But had you wait, you could get a lower interest rate and possibly pay a lower price. So there are opportunities there for owner operators who are tuned in to undercurrents. I think it's probably a higher level of development for the owner operator. It's probably not something that you worry too much as a new owner operator. You got enough on your plate already. New owner operators trying to figure out how to do preventative maintenance. And they're trying to look at their profitability and run miles. But a more experienced owner operator is going to pay more attention to the undercurrents. What's going on in the bigger picture? What are the trend lines? And they start planning accordingly. So the senior guys always have their pulse on undercurrents. They pay close attention to that because it'll affect their decision when they buy another truck or if they buy another truck. They'll affect their decision when to buy stocks, maybe when to sell stocks. When they're going to retire or when they're going to decide to keep working, how many more years they're going to keep working. A lot of this affects their timing of when they're going to do things. They already know they're going to do it. Like they already know they're going to buy another truck. The question is, when are they going to buy another truck? Well, that depends on their understanding of the undercurrents. What's going on in the larger picture. Could they got to put it in context. They just don't go out and buy another truck just because they feel like it. They understand that, truck prices, may be a good opportunity. The prices go up and the prices come down. If you could time it perfectly, you would always buy your prices when the prices are down. But it's very hard to do. But the only way you have a chance of doing that is if you understand the undercurrents that's going on with a larger picture. And then in the not too distant future, you're going to have midterm elections. And as we approach on the calendar, get closer and closer to midterm elections, the larger impact that's going to have on undercurrents. There's many things going on politically, globally, within the industry or within the company. But this seasoned owner operator is going to have his finger on the pulse. And he's going to try to understand as much about these undercurrents as he possibly can and look for opportunities to either grow his business, make it more profitable, to invest. So that's a new area for seasoned owner operators. If you haven't already explored that, is start thinking about undercurrents and how that can affect your business. All right, guys, that's all I got for you. If you're watching, we'll see you on the internet.